She was building a home for her baby one log at a time. The cowboy watching was a widower dreaming of a family. She worked alone under the low sky, the chill and the wind slicing through her faded shawl. With hands blistered and raw, she hoisted another log against the spine of her half-raised cabin. The logs were uneven, heavy, stubborn things, but so was she. Every nail driven into pine sang the same refrain. Don't quit. Not now. Not with the baby coming. Her name was Clara. No one in this valley knew that yet. Not the ranchers. Not the male driver. Not even the man who owned the land beside hers. The one who watched from a distance. Always silent. Always shadowed. She had traded her wedding ring for nails in the last town, and her pride for a half-rotten hammer in the one before. There was no room for vanity anymore. Only hunger. Only the unborn child she protected like a second spine. She paused at the edge of her cabin in the making, fingers numb, stomach tightening with the strain. Beneath the oversized coat, her belly swelled a way that made bending hard and sleep harder. But she'd chosen this place for its distance, for its quiet. No one to knock, no one to pity, except him. He sat atop his horse most afternoons, up on the slope near the cottonwoods, where his land ended and hers began. Tall in the saddle, arms crossed, he looked carved from stone, weather hat low over his brow, boots planted like roots in stirrups. He never approached, never waved, just watched. Some women might have feared a man like that, but Clara recognized a kind of stillness in him, same kind that lived in her chest. Something broken, something grieving. He was the widower. She'd heard his story whispered at the general store before she vanished into the back to buy flour. Lost his wife and boy in a prairie fire 2 winters past. Stayed on that ranch of his out of habit. Some said, out of sorrow, others guessed. Folks called him Eli. Clara didn't need their stories. She saw enough in his silence. One afternoon, just before the snow threatened its first kiss on the earth, she dropped a log. Not like the others. This one fell wrong, heavy on her foot, sharp against bone. Pain shot up her leg and made her stagger. She gritted her teeth, but a cry escaped before she could swallow it. And from the ridge, he moved. The first time, he rode down slow, careful as if approaching a wild animal, boots crunching as he dismounted. She sat on a stump, gripping her ankle, breath shallow. May I help? His voice was deeper than she expected. Not rough, just unused, like a violin string long unplayed. Clara shook her head. I've got it. He didn't argue, just stood there, wind ruffling his coat. You shouldn't lift logs that size. Not in your condition. A pause. Her jaw clenched. Didn't know it was your concern. It's not, he said plainly, but you're bleeding. She looked down, blood dark in her sock, seeping from where the bark had torn skin. Her ankle throbbed. The cold made it worse. Still, she would have bitten off her own tongue before asking a man for help. I have it handled, she said again, voice harder this time. He nodded once. You've built half a wall in 3 days. No hammer swing wasted. I've seen that kind of grit before. She glanced up. Where? In my wife, before the baby came. Silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. Something in her chest loosened, then coiled again. I'm Clara. He nodded again. Eli. He didn't offer to carry her inside, didn't touch her, just left a folded square of linen beside her foot before walking back to his horse. That night, wind howled through the skeleton of her home. She huddled beneath patched quilts in the corner that would someday be her kitchen. Her foot ached, her hands throbbed, and the fire she built sputtered under green wood. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel invisible. She'd said her name out loud, and someone had heard it. By morning, the wind had died, but not before leaving frost on the grass. Clara rose with effort, boiled oats, and tried not to wince as she stood. Her body moved slower now. Each task took longer. She leaned her weight to the right to favor the injury, cursing under her breath as she braced another beam. Then she heard it, the distant creak of a wagon. She turned. Eli was coming down the trail, reins in one hand, the other guiding a small cart behind his horse. In the wagon bed, a bundle of split wood, stacked clean and tied with rope. "I didn't ask for charity," she called as he neared. He didn't answer, just parked the wagon near her fire pit and began unloading the wood. Clara crossed her arms. "I can cut my own. I've done it before." "Not with that ankle," he said, glancing at her foot, "and not with a child coming." She hated that he was right. "You don't even know me. I know you're building something worth finishing." His eyes met hers, gray as river stones, and held. In them was a quiet sorrow, but also a spark, a flicker of memory, maybe, of hope not quite dead. She took a slow breath. "I don't want your pity. You don't have it." He laid the last of the wood down, then turned to go. "Wait," she said. He paused. "Why are you doing this?" He looked out toward the tree line. "Because when I was where you are now, no one did." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Clara stepped forward, ginger on her foot. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded square of brown cloth. "My last tea," she said. "Trade." He hesitated, then accepted it with a nod. "Deal." As his wagon creaked up the ridge, Clara stood by her fire, a tremble in her lip she didn't have the strength to hide. Her foot still hurt. Her hands were still raw. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone in the cold. That night, the frost returned with a vengeance. Clouds rolled in dark and mean, and by midnight, snow came like dust shaken from the heavens. It hissed across the half-built walls, stole heat from the fire, crept beneath her coat. She held her belly, whispering to it through chattering teeth. "Just one more night. We can make it." But the wind howled louder. Her fire died. Then hooves. She pushed up on her elbows, heart pounding. Out of the snow, Eli appeared, lantern in hand. He didn't speak, just stepped into her half-made shelter, took one look at her shivering frame, and said, "Come." "I can't leave the tools," she said through blue lips. "I'll get them tomorrow." "I can't leave the wall." "You'll finish it," he said, his voice firm now. "But not if you freeze." She looked at him, this quiet man carved by loss, and for once let herself lean. He wrapped her in his coat and helped her onto the saddle. One hand steadied her back. She didn't ask where they were going, didn't need to. She just pressed a palm to her belly, felt the life within her shift, and held tighter to the warmth that led her through the snow. Behind them, the wind swallowed her little half-made home. But ahead, light burned in the distance, and for the first time, it felt like she might make it. The morning after he carried her through the snow, Clara woke to warmth. Not from the hearth. It was still unlit, but from the soft wool blankets pulled over her and the smell of coffee rising from the stove. She opened her eyes to a room not her own. The walls were finished here, smooth, insulated. The roof held no drafts, and the windows wore curtains faded by sun and time. A table stood in the corner, set for two, though only one man lived here now. His coat hung by the door. She sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her lower back. The pain had dulled, her foot stiff but bearable. The baby shifted in her belly, low and heavy. She exhaled. Eli was outside. She saw him through the window, splitting logs with precise, unhurried swings. Every motion was deliberate, measured. Like he didn't just cut wood, he argued with it. Snow clung to his shoulders, and the breath rising from his mouth came in silent plumes. Clara swung her legs over the side of the bed, wincing as her foot touched the cold floor. She took in the room. A rocking chair near the fire, a photograph nailed crooked on the wall, his wife and son, both smiling, caught in a summer long gone. The boy at Eli's chin, the woman his quiet eyes. Clara stood, suddenly feeling like an intruder. Gratitude turned to a low burn of shame. She hadn't asked to stay, and yet here she was, tucked into someone else's memories, protected by a man who owed her. When she stepped outside, the wind had softened. Sunlight kissed the snow, making it glitter like crushed glass. Eli didn't stop splitting wood, but he spoke between strikes. "Should have let you freeze, maybe." She raised a brow. "Would have saved you the trouble. You'd have been stiff by morning. I'd have had to bury you." She cracked a faint smile. "And you'd rather save yourself the labor." He nodded once. "Exactly." They stood in silence. Then quietly she said, "Thank you." Eli looked up. His face, always unreadable, softened a little around the eyes. "You needed shelter. That's all." She watched his hands, how he wiped the axe blade clean, set aside like a weapon laid down after battle. There was strength in him, yes, but also restraint. Clara saw in the way he moved, the way he never touched her without permission, never asked her questions she wasn't ready to answer. He understood something about loss, about boundaries. Inside, she stirred the fire while he hauled in more wood. She noticed how everything in the cabin had a place. The floor was swept, the pantry modest but organized. There were 2 cups, 2 plates, but only one chair at the table. A life pared down to what was essential. Grief had done that to her too. When the kettle began to hiss, she turned to him. "I'll only stay another night. Then I'm going back." He nodded. No protest. Just that quiet, infuriating acceptance. "I mean it. I know." She sipped the tea and watched him over the rim. "Why don't you come down from that ridge more often?" He shrugged. "No reason to. There's a whole world past your fence line." "There was," he said. "Then it burned." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Clara felt the weight of it settle between them like a stone. She'd seen that same weight in the mirror when her own world cracked apart. "You still dream of them?" she asked before she could stop herself. His hand paused on the kettle handle. "Every night." She set her cup down. "Then maybe you should come off that ridge." He didn't answer. The next day, she limped outside bundled in layers and found her coat already dusted off, her boots set beside it. She pulled them on and started for the trail without a word. Her foot ached, but not enough to stop her. Eli caught up beside her. "You're sure?" "I didn't come here to be rescued." "I know." They walked in silence, the land vast and unbothered by their small movements across it. Pines stood like watchmen on the hills, and somewhere a hawk circled, unseen but near. When her cabin came into view, she stopped short. The logs had been restacked, her tools oiled. Even her tarp, once torn, had been mended and tied down. "You came back?" she asked. He looked ahead. "You built this alone. I figured it ought to still be standing when you returned." She felt something tighten in her chest. That old, familiar resentment for needing help, for being helped. But beneath it, something warmer flickered, something fragile. "I don't want to owe anyone," she said. "You don't, but you keep showing up." "I know." She didn't respond. She just walked past him, reached the edge of her wall, and picked up the hammer with both hands. Her palms burned. Her foot throbbed. But she lifted the beam anyway, set it in place, and drove the first nail with a grunt. He watched, didn't interfere. By sundown, 2 walls stood, not finished, not perfect, but standing. He brought her supper in a cloth. Cornbread and beans, still warm, and didn't stay. She sat by her fire that night, one hand on her belly, the other on the hammer beside her. She ate slowly, watching the smoke drift toward the stars. Her fingers brushed the lip of the cornbread, the butter folded in like a kindness she hadn't earned. When a coyote howled in the distance, she looked toward the ridge. Eli stood there again, dark against the snow. Not on a horse, not in the saddle, just standing. She didn't wave, didn't call, but this time she didn't look away. The next day brought wind again, sharp and insistent. Clouds rolled in fast. Clara braced her wall with rope, stacking more logs, but the sky was shifting. A storm coming. And then, crack, a gust tore one of the upper beams loose. It snapped, caught the tarp, and flung itself sideways. Clara jumped back, ankle twisting. She hit the dirt hard, snow powdering her breath. Her shelter groaned like it might collapse. Then she heard him, boots crunching, breath ragged. He was there before she could rise. No horse this time. Just Eli, hands out, eyes scanning the damage. "I'm fine," she said, breathless. "You're not." He pulled her up, cradling her against him like something precious. She pushed at his chest. "I said I'm fine." "And I heard you," he said, but he didn't let go. Rain began to fall, slow and cold, the kind that seeps into bone. He looked at her cabin. "It won't hold." "I'll fix it." Not in this storm. Eli, he touched her cheek just once. Callous fingers, warm despite the wind. She froze. You don't have to prove anything to me, he said. And in his voice, she heard not pity, but plea. She looked away. Her throat tightened. Then let me come back on my own. His arms dropped. He stepped back. Lightning cracked across the sky. You got 2 walls now, he said, voice low, and a little mercy. Then he turned, walked into the storm, and left her standing in the wind, soaked, shivering, but strong. Clara watched him go, rain dripping from her lashes, and for the first time, she wasn't sure who needed saving more, her, or the man walking away from her without a backward glance. The storm broke something in her. Not her body. It had endured worse, but something quieter. That night, Clara sat in the cold and watched rain drip through the beams she hadn't managed to seal. The cornbread was gone. Her coat was damp. Every log in the pile was soaked through. Still, she didn't leave. She pulled her knees to her chest and tried to remember what it felt like to be warm without owing someone for it. The baby shifted low again. Pressure, a slow tightening. Her hands folded over her belly like a promise she refused to speak aloud. She didn't sleep much. By morning, her lips were cracked, her ankles swollen again, and the corner of the tarp had torn loose. She tried to fix it. Her fingers wouldn't hold the knots. Then, to the veil of dawn, footsteps. She didn't turn, just stared at the ground, jaw set. You said you'd come back on your own, Eli said behind her. I did. He stepped closer, stopped short of the tarp. You were gone 2 nights. I know. You could have died. I didn't. He stood silent, then dropped the canvas bag at her feet. Inside, jerky, kindling dry socks, and a tin of soup sealed tight. I told you I didn't need. I know, he said. His voice was different this time. Not careful, not gentle, just tired. I can't keep showing up like this, Clara. She looked up at him. Then don't. The words stung her own tongue. Eli bent down and pulled a small pot from a bag. He set it on her stones. Soup needs flame, and a place to keep it. He stood and walked away. She didn't stop him this time. When night fell, Clara tried to light the fire 3 times. The kindling hissed but wouldn't catch. Wind seeped in from the cracks, licked her skin like frost. She wrapped herself in a quilt and whispered lullabies to the child in her belly, songs she barely remembered, words she hadn't spoken since she ran from that house 2 counties over, the one where silence sat heavier than fists. On the 4th try, the match sparked. The flame caught, tiny but stubborn, in the shelter of a tin can. She fed it like a wild thing, coaxing it with breath, with shavings, with the smallest dry stick she had left. When it held, she felt tears well, not from sadness, but from the quiet relief of being seen by no one. She fed the fire all night just to keep it alive. She didn't sleep. Not really. At first light, he returned. No horse, no cart, just Eli, holding a box of nails and a bundle of sanded planks tied with twine. He stood at the edge of her walls, only broad enough for a hearth. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, hiding the redness. You're assuming I want one. You lit a fire, figured it deserved a home. He didn't ask to help. He just stepped forward and began laying out the stones she'd gathered and never placed. She should have told him to stop. She should have walked away, but she didn't. Instead, she lowered herself beside him, watched his hands measure the shape of the fire's future. He moved slowly, the way someone moves when they've buried too many things. Every stone he placed was a word he didn't say. Every board he nailed into place was a memory he didn't trust himself to speak aloud. At midday, the sun broke through. The wind eased. Clara stood back and looked at the half-built hearth. It wasn't perfect, but it looked like something meant to last. She stepped into silence between them and said softly, I was married once. Eli didn't look up. I left him when I found out I was pregnant. First hit I could take. Couldn't watch my baby learn that kind of silence. Still, he didn't speak. I built this cabin with stolen nails and a name I don't use anymore. That's what you're fixing. His eyes lifted to hers then. Clear, quiet, open in a way they hadn't been before. My boy, he said, wasn't supposed to be home that day. Fire started fast. By the time I reached the house, the roof was already gone. She drew in a breath. I pulled her out, he said. Not him. Neither of them moved, not for a long time. When Clara finally spoke, her voice barely carried. Does the fire go away? No, he said, but it learns to sit still, if you build it right. That evening, Eli stayed to finish the hearth. They didn't speak much, didn't need to. Their silences no longer scraped like stone. They shaped the space between them. When the sun dipped behind the trees, Clara placed the first flame on the hearth they'd made. It rose strong, tall, as if it belonged. She stepped back, one hand on her belly, the other steadying herself against the wall. Eli stood nearby, not touching, not lingering, just watching. And then she did something she hadn't planned. She reached for his hand, just for a moment. It was warm, solid, unshaking. When she let go, he didn't speak, but he looked at her like he saw the shape of something returning. Not his wife, not his son, but something that made the silence worth staying for. Then he left. The fire stayed lit long after he was gone. It crackled and snapped and painted her walls gold. And for the first time in years, Clara fell asleep not from exhaustion, but from peace. The cold came back harder that week, as if winter had been waiting for them to let their guard down. Frost curled along the eaves of the cabin, and the sky took on that heavy gray that warned of snow. But inside, the hearth burned steady. Clara fed it each morning with careful hands, lips moving in silent gratitude as the flames stretched awake. The walls were all up now, for full sides, sealed and solid, each log a testament to over-weariness. The roof slanted sharp against the wind. The floor still dirt, but clean. Her steps were slower these days, her belly full and low, but her hands had never been steadier. She was weeks from delivery, maybe less. The ache in her lower back didn't lie. Eli came each day at dusk. He never asked to stay, never invited himself in, but he always brought something: canned peaches, a pair of wool socks, a carved wooden spoon. He left them at the door without ceremony, and most nights he lingered long enough to see the hearth light flicker behind the window before walking back through the snow. Clara had grown used to the silence they shared, the kind that meant something. One morning, while gathering behind the cabin, she heard a sound she hadn't heard in weeks. A voice. Male, slurred by distance and liquor. The sound froze her blood cold. She turned. Her heart caught. A man stood near the edge of her clearing, unshaven, boots sinking into the snow. He wore a worn hat pulled low and a grin that hadn't aged well. He held something in his hand, a bottle, half drunk. His eyes scanned her like a butcher choosing meat. There she is, he drawled. Clara's breath hitched. Clara May, you little thief. Thought you could run off and raise his brat on your own. She didn't answer. She didn't move. He stepped closer, shoulders swaying with drink. He's been looking for you. Says that baby's his, whether you like it or not. And me? I got good money in my pocket if I bring you back breathing. Her body pulsed with fear, but something in her spine stayed stiff. She took a single step back. You won't touch me, she said low. He grinned wider. You sure about that? He took another step, and then a sound cracked through the woods, the sound of a rifle being cocked. From behind her cabin, Eli emerged. He didn't yell, didn't curse. He didn't need to. He raised a barrel and leveled at the man's chest with the quiet certainty of someone who'd fired it before and didn't mind doing it again. That's far enough, Eli said. The man froze, his face warping between drunk courage and dawning fear. Who the hell are you? Eli's jaw didn't move. The man who'll bury you if she asks me to. For a moment, only the wind spoke. Then the stranger laughed. Too loud. She yours now? You playing house out here. Eli didn't blink. She's hers. But I'm the one standing between you and that cabin. The man spat at the snow, rage creeping up his neck. You don't know what she's done. I know what she's building, Eli said, voice even. And you don't belong here. He took one step closer, gun still steady. Clara felt something break open in her chest. Fear, yes, but also something raw and electric. Get off this land, Eli said. before I put you in it." The man hesitated. The weight of the rifle, the steadiness in Eli's hands. Then he turned, cursed, and stumbled back the way he came. It wasn't until his shadow was gone that Clara exhaled. Eli lowered the rifle. "You all right?" She nodded barely. "How did you—" "I saw his tracks this morning. Followed them." She sank to the log behind her. Her hands trembled. Eli didn't speak again. He just moved to her side and knelt, his hand hovering near hers but not touching. "You knew he might come?" she asked. "I hoped he wouldn't." Her voice cracked. "He was going to take me back." "He won't." She looked at him, saw the truth of it in his eyes. Not just a promise of protection, but belief. In her, in what she'd made. "I thought I could do all this alone," she whispered. "You did." She let the silence fill her again, but this time it warmed her. Later that night, the snow returned in full. It whispered against the walls and windows, gentle and thick. Clara lit the fire early, her hands moving with purpose, heart still racing beneath the calm. She didn't ask Eli to stay, but he didn't leave. He stood inside the doorway, eyes catching on the cot she'd arranged near the fire, on the kettle she'd filled, on the 2 cups. She moved first. "Come in," she said. He did. They didn't speak much after that. The fire cracked. The wind howled and then softened. Clara lay on her cot, curled around the baby pressing against her ribs. Eli sat by the fire, rifle leaning beside him, always within reach. At some point, she slept. When she woke, the fire was still burning. And so was he, still there, still watching. She turned toward him. "Eli." He looked up. "You can come closer." He hesitated, then moved to the edge of her cot. She reached for his hand, just as she had the night the hearth first lit. And this time, he didn't let go. "I don't know what happens next," she whispered. "We keep building," he said. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the fire wrap around them both. Outside, the storm passed. The snow melted slow from the roof. The logs held, and still the cabin stood. If this story warmed your heart like a fire on a cold prairie night, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss another tale from the frontier.